and welcome back to the city of Ember. We are here live in the classroom. Here are my friends.
Hey guys.
Hi. All right, those crazy. Awesome. I am so glad my friends are making a nice choice now and settling down because we've got lots to read. Yesterday, we read chapter 2. Lena made some questionable choices by getting on top of the gathering hall and showing out a bit. I don't know that she intended to show out. I think she just got carried away. But then she got literally carried away by the guards. So, now we are going to take our point of view. We're going to check in with Dune. We spent some time with Lena yesterday. Everybody was on the first day of their job. Lena as the messenger, Dune as a pipeworks laborer. So everybody should have a copy of this book. Everybody, looking at my friend Credence over there, making sure she's got a copy of the book. Thank you, Joshie. And we're going to turn to page 40. Going to give you a second to get there. It's called Under Ember. What do we remember as Under Ember? Do we know what's under there? Brianna, thank you for raising your hand, Brianna.
The pipe works?
The pipe works. That's under there. And? The generator. Dun, dun, dun. All right. So let's see what's going on under there. Let's see what Dune discovered. Pardon me. That morning, Dune had arrived at the pipeworks full of anticipation. This was the world of serious work at last, where he would get a chance to do something useful. What he'd learned in school and from his father and from his own investigations, he could put it all to good purpose now. He pushed open the heavy pipeworks door and stepped inside. The air smelled strongly of dampness and moldy rubber, which seemed to him a pleasant and interesting smell. He strode up the hallway where the yellow slickers hung from pegs on the walls. Do you know what a slicker is? A slicker is another name for a raincoat. So a slicker sometimes would be like a big yellow work raincoat. Sometimes it would look kind of like a poncho, where it just kind of goes over you don't have arms and it's not a fitted garment. So a slicker, I want you to visualize this now. He walks in and it's cold and damp. It's got this interesting kind of wet smell. And hanging on pegs along the wall are these yellow raincoats or slickers. Kind of paints a picture, doesn't it? Yes, ma'am. So, here we go. At the end of the hallway was a room full of people, some of them sitting on benches and pulling on knee-high rubber boots, some struggling into their slickers, some buckling on tool belts. A raucous clamor, that means a loud noise, filled the room. Dune watched from the doorway, eager to join them, but not sure what to do. Hey, Marcus, tune in, buddy. After a moment, a man emerged from the throng. He thrust out a hand. "Lister Mupp, Pipeworks Director," he said. "You're the new boy, right? What size feet do you have? Large, medium, or small?" "Medium," said Dune, and Lister found him a slicker and a pair of boots. The boots were so ancient that their green rubber was cracked all over, as if covered with spider webs. He gave Dune a tool belt, too, in which were wrenches and hammers, spools of wire and tape, and tubes of some sort of black goop. "You'll be in Tunnel 97 today," Lister said. "Arlen Froll will go down with you and show you what to do." He pointed at a short, delicate-looking girl with a white blonde braid down her back. "She may not look like an expert, but she is." Dune buckled his tool belt around his waist and put on his slicker, which, for some reason, smelled like sweaty feet. Ugh. "This way," said Arlen, without saying hello or smiling. She strode through the crowd of workers to the door marked Stairway and opened it. Stone steps led so far down that Dune couldn't see the end of them. On either side was a sheer wall of dark reddish stone, glistening with dampness. There was no railing. Along the ceiling ran a single wire from which a light bulb hung every few yards. Water stood in shallow pools on each stair, in the hollow worn into the stones by years of footsteps. They started down. Dune concentrated on his feet. The clumsy boots made it hard not to stumble. As they went deeper, he began to hear a low roar, so low that he seemed to hear it more with his stomach than with his ears. It grew louder and louder. Was it a machine of some kind? Maybe the generator? The stairwell came to an end at the door marked Main Tunnel. Arlen opened it, and as they stepped through, Dune realized that the sound he had been hearing wasn't a machine. It was the river. He stood still, staring. Like most people, he had never been really sure what a river was, just that it was water that somehow flowed on its own. He'd imagined that it would be like the clear, narrow stream that came out of the kitchen faucet, only bigger and horizontal instead of vertical. But this was something entirely different. Not a stream of water, but endless tons of it pouring by. Wide as the widest street in Ember, churning and dipping and swirling, the river roared past, its turbulent surface like black liquid glass scattered with flecks of light. What an amazing simile that was. Can you just picture it? And that's the point of figurative language, is to make it so descriptive that you could close your eyes and see it. Dune had never seen anything that moved so fast, and he had never heard such a thunderous, heart-stopping roar. The path they stood on was about 6 feet wide and ran parallel or alongside the river for farther than Dune could see in both directions. In the wall along the path were openings that must lead, Dune thought, to the tunnels that branched everywhere below the city. A string of lights like the one in the stairway hung high up against the arched ceiling. Dune knew that he was standing beneath the north edge of Ember. In school, you were taught to remember the directions this way. North was the direction of the river. South was the direction of the greenhouses. East was the direction of the school. And west was the direction left over, having nothing in particular to mark it. All the pipeworks tunnels branched off from the main tunnel to the south toward the city. Arlen leaned toward Dune and shouted into his ear. "First we'll go to the beginning of the river," she said. She led him up the main tunnel for a long way. They passed other people in yellow slickers who greeted Arlen with a nod and glanced curiously at Dune. After 15 minutes or so, they came to the east edge of the pipeworks, where the river surged up from a deep chasm in the ground. A chasm is a hole. Churning so violently that its dark water turned white and filled the air with a spray that wet Dune's face. In the wall to their right was a wide double door. "See that door right there?" Arlen shouted, pointing. "Yes," Dune shouted back. "That's the generator room. Can we go in?" "Of course not," said Arlen. "You have to have special permission." She pointed back down the main tunnel. "Now we'll go to the end of the river," she said. She led him back, past their stairway door, all the way to the west edge of the pipeworks. There the river flowed into a huge opening in the wall and vanished into darkness. "Where does it go?" Dune asked. Arlen just shrugged. "Back into the ground, I guess. Now find Tunnel 97 and get to work." Bless you. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "This is the map," she said. "You have one in your pocket, too. You have to use the map to find your way around in here." The map looked to Dune like an immense centipede. The river arched across the top of the page like a centipede's body, and the tunnels dangled down from it like hundreds of long, long legs, and all tangled up with each other. To get to Tunnel 97, they followed a complicated route through passageways lined with crusty, rusted pipes that carried water to all the buildings of Ember. Puddles stood on the floor of the tunnel, and the water dripped in brown rivulets, that means little rivers, down the wall. Just as in the main tunnel, there was a string of bulbs along the ceiling that provided dim light. Dune occupied his mind by calculating how far underground he was. From the river to the ceiling of the main tunnel must be 30 feet or so, he thought. Above that were the storerooms, which occupied a layer of at least 20 feet high. So that meant that he was 50 feet underground. Top of page 45. Everybody should be following along at the top of page 45. So he's 50 feet underground with tons of earth and rock and buildings above him. The thought made him tense up in his shoulders. He cast a quick glance upwards, as if all the weight might collapse onto his head. "Here we are," said Arlen. She was standing next to the leak that spurted a stream of water straight out from the wall. "We have to turn the shut-off valve, take the pipe apart, put on a new connector, and then stick it back together again." With wrenches, hammers, washers, and black goop, they did this, getting soaked in the process. It took them most of the morning and proved to Dune that the city was in even worse shape than he had suspected. Not only were the lights about to fail and the supplies about to run out, but the water system was breaking down. The whole city was crumbling. And what was anyone doing about it? When the lunch break came, Arlen took her lunch sack from her pocket in her tool belt and went off to meet some friends a few tunnels away. "Yeah, you stay right here and wait until I get back," she said as she left. "If you wander around, you'll get lost." But Dune set out as soon as she disappeared. Using his map, he found his way back to the main tunnel and then hurried to the east end. He wasn't going to wait for special permission to see the generator. He was pretty sure he could find a way to get in on his own, and he did. Credence. Bottom of page 45, last sentence, last time I'm asking. He simply stood by the door and waited for someone to come out. Quite soon, a stout woman carrying a lunch sack pushed open the door and walked away. She didn't notice him. Before the door could close again, Dune slipped inside. Such a horrendous noise met him that he staggered backwards a few steps. It was an ear-splitting, growling, grinding, screaming noise shot through with a hoarse rackety-rackety sound that underscored with a deep chugga, chugga, chugga. Dune clapped his hands over his ears and stepped forward. In front of him was a gigantic black machine, 2 stories high. It was vibrating so hard that it looked as if it might explode any second. Several people wearing earmuffs were busy around it. None of them noticed him come in. He tapped one of them on the shoulder, and the person jumped and whirled around. He was an old man, Dune saw, with a deeply lined brown face. "I want to learn about the generator!" Dune screamed, but he might as well have saved his breath. No one could be heard in the uproar. The old man glared at him, made a shooing motion with his hand, and then turned back to work. Dune stood and watched for a while. Beside the huge machine were ladders on wheels that helped the workers reach the high parts. All over the room, greasy-looking cans and tools littered the floor. Against the walls stood big bins holding every kind of bolt and screw and gear and lever and rod and tube, all of them black with age and jumbled together. The workers scurried between the bins, and the generator simply stood and watched the thing shake. After a few minutes, Dune left. He was horrified. All his life he had studied how things worked. It was one of his favorite things to do. He could take apart an old watch and put it together exactly as it had been. He understood how the faucets in the sink worked. He fixed the toilet many times. He'd made a wheeled cart out of the parts of an old armchair. He even had a hazy idea of what was going on in the refrigerator. He was proud of his mechanical talent. There was only one thing that he didn't understand at all, and that was electricity. What was the power that ran through the wires and into the light bulbs? Where did it come from? He had thought that if he could just get a look at the generator, he would have the clue that he needed. From there, he could begin to work on a solution that would keep the lights of Ember burning. But one glimpse at the generator showed him that, hey guys, we're not drawing. Put your markers away, and hey, I need you to pay attention. We're at the bottom of page 47. Josh, bottom of page 47. Where did it come from? He had the thought if he could just get a look at the generator, he would have the clue that he needed. From there, he could begin to work on a solution that would keep the lights of Ember burning. But one glimpse of the generator showed him how foolish he was. He'd expected to see something whose workings he could understand. A wheel turning, a spark being struck, some wires that led from one point to another. But this monstrous, roaring thing, well, he wondered if anyone understood how it worked. It looked as if all they were doing were trying to keep it from flying apart. Top of page 48. As it turned out, he was right. When the day was over and he was upstairs taking off his boots and slicker, he saw the old man from the generator room and went to talk to him. "Can you explain to me about the generator?" he said. "Can you tell me how it works?" The old man just sighed. "All I know is the river makes it go." "But how?" The man shrugged. Who knows? Our job is just to keep it from breaking down. If a part breaks, we got to put on a new one. If a part freezes up, we got to oil it. He wiped his hand wearily across his forehead, leaving a streak of black grease. "I've been working on the generator for 20 years. It's always managed to chug along, but this year, I don't know. Thing seems to break down every couple of minutes." He cracked a wry smile. "Of course, I hear we might run out of light bulbs before that, and then it won't matter if the generator works or not." Running out of light bulbs, running out of power, running out of time. Disaster was right around the corner. That's what Dune was thinking about when he stopped outside of the gathering hall on his way home and saw Lena on the roof. She looked so free and happy up there. He didn't know why she was on the roof, but he wasn't surprised. It was the kind of thing she did, turning up in unexpected places, and now that she was a messenger, she could go just about anywhere. But how could she be so lighthearted when everything was falling apart? He headed for home. He lived with his father in a 2-bedroom apartment over his father's shop in Greengate Square. The small items shop, which sold things like nails, pens, tacks, clips, springs, jar lids, doorknobs, bits of wire, shards of glass, chunks of wood, and other small things that might be useful in some way. The small item shop had overflowed somewhat into their apartment above. In their front room, where people might display a nice teapot or a tabletop or a few attractive squashes or tomatoes on a shelf, they had buckets and boxes and baskets full of spare items for the shop, things Dune's father had collected but not yet organized for selling. Often these items spilled over onto the floor. It was easy to trip over things in his apartment and not a good idea to go barefoot. Today, Dune didn't stop in at the shop to see his father before going upstairs. He wasn't in the mood for conversation. Yes, ma'am.
I feel like the books where the instruction that he they might have something to do with the lights going out.
So you think the builders from the beginning of the book might have something to do with the lights going out, the pipes failing? Interesting. Bo?
The box that opened could have been like a way to stop the whole place from going out.
So perhaps inside of the box is a solution to the problem?
Maybe inside of the box is like a map into the darkness.
No.
And it doesn't go
Ooh.
on forever.
The box. It said in the stuff in the box was the instructions to leave when it was the right time. And I think that now is the right time in there.
Oh, all right. So it said that the instructions in the box were the how to get out.
Just
Where
in
it
a
is,
closet
because that stupid mayor that
Yeah,
did it as a part of the guy.
they made.
maybe so. Let's see. Marcus.
I think the instruction is to where you can actually identify what the item is and then like make a mystery.
Maybe so.
Maybe it's
And Luis.
I think there's like something in it that you have to go to like an unknown religion to like get something like in a new generator.
Maybe so. Yes.
maybe it's instructions for the generator to get it working again.
Wait, let's find out. I can't take it anymore. He headed for home. Let's see. He didn't stop in the shop. We're at the bottom of 49. He wasn't in the mood for conversation. He removed 2 buckets of stuff from the couch. It looked like mostly shoe heels, and flopped down on the cushions. He'd been stupid to think he could understand the generator just by looking at it, when the other people had been working on it their entire lives. The thing was, he had to admit, he'd always thought that he was smarter than other people. He'd been sure he could learn about electricity and help save the city. He wanted to be the one to do it. He had imagined many times a ceremony in Harkin Square organized to thank him for saving Ember, with the entire population in attendance and his father beaming from the front row. All Dune's life, his father had been saying to him, "You're a good boy and a smart boy. You'll do grand things someday. I know you will." But Dune hadn't done much that was grand so far. He ached to do something truly important, like finding the secret of electricity and, as his father watched, be rewarded for his achievement. The size of the reward didn't matter. A small certificate would do, or maybe a badge to sew on his jacket. Now he was stuck in the muck of the pipeworks, patching up pipes that would leak and break again in a matter of days. It was even more useless and boring than being a messenger. The thought made him suddenly furious. He sat up and grabbed his shoe heel out of the bucket at his feet and hurled it with all of his might. It arrived at the front door just as the door opened. Dune heard a loud whack and a loud ouch at the same moment. Then he saw the long, lean, tired-looking face of his father in the doorway. Dune's anger drained away. "Oh, I hit you, Father. I'm sorry." Dune's father rubbed the side of his head. He was a tall man, bald as a peeled potato, with a high forehead and a long chin. What a great visual, right?
Bald as a peeled potato.
It's bald as a peeled potato. What a wonderful simile. With a high forehead and a long chin. He had kind, slightly puzzled gray eyes. "Ah! Got me in the ear," he said. "What was that?" "Oh, I got angry for a second," said Dune. "I threw one of these old heels." "I see," said his father. He brushed some bottle tops off of a chair and sat down. "Does it have to do with your first day of work, son?" "Yes," said Dune. His father nodded. "Why don't you tell me about it?" he said. Dune told him. When he was finished, his father ran a hand across his bald head as if smoothing down the hair that wasn't there. He sighed. "Well," he said, "sounds unpleasant, I have to admit. About the generator especially. Well, that's bad news. But the pipeworks is your assignment. There's no way around it. What you get is what you get. What you do with what you get, though, well, that's more the point, wouldn't you say?" He looked at Dune and smiled a bit sadly. "I guess so," said Dune. "What can I do?" "I don't know," said his father. "You'll think of something. You're a clever boy. The main thing is to pay attention. Pay close attention to everything. Notice what no one else notices. Then you'll know what no one else knows. And that's always useful." He took off his coat and hung it from a peg on the wall. "How's the worm?" he asked. I haven't looked at it yet. It's top of page 52, said Dune. He went into his room and came out with a small wooden box covered with an old scarf. He set the box on the table and took the scarf off, and he and his father both bent over to look inside. A couple of limp cabbage leaves lay on the bottom of the box. On one of the leaves was a worm about an inch long. A few days before school ended, Dune had found the worm on the underside of the cabbage leaf he was slicing up for dinner. It was a pale, soft green and velvety, smooth all over, with tiny, stubby legs. Dune had always been fascinated by bugs. He wrote down his observations about them in a book he had titled Crawling and Flying Things. Each page of the book was divided lengthwise down the center. On the left, he drew the pictures with a pencil sharpened to a needle-like point. Moth wings with their branching patterns of veins, spider legs which had minute hairs and tiny feet like claws, beetles with their feelers and their glossy armor. On the right, he wrote what he observed about each creature. He noted what it ate, where it slept, where it laid its eggs, and, if he knew, how long it survived. Make sure that your book is open to page 52 and you are following along.
The last chapter.
And it's right. Last paragraph.
paragraph.
That's right. This was difficult with fast-moving creatures like moths and spiders. To learn anything about them, he had to catch what glimpses he could as they lived their lives out in the open. If he put them in a box, they scrambled around for a few days and then died. This worm, though, was different. It seemed perfectly happy to live in the box Dune had made for it. So far, it did only 3 things: eat, sleep. Well, it looked like it was sleeping, though Dune couldn't tell if the worm closed its eyes or, even if it had eyes. And expel tiny black poop balls. Yuck. That was it. I've had it for 5 days now, said Dune. It's twice as big as it was when we got it. It's eaten 2 square inches of cabbage leaf. You're writing all this down? Dune nodded. Maybe, said his father, you'll find some interesting new bugs in the pipeworks. Yeah, maybe, said Dune. But to himself he said, no, that's not enough. I can't go plodding around the pipeworks, stopping up leaks, looking for bugs, and pretending that there's no emergency. I have to find something important down there, something that's going to help. I have to. I just have to. And there we are. That concludes our chapter today. Chapter 3. Tomorrow we will move on with something lost, nothing found. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye.